Hello everyone, you're watching All 24 News. This is a show we're dedicating to the Africa Startup Conference. This is the 4th edition of the Africa Startup Conference here in Algeria, the continent's biggest innovation gathering, the continent's biggest gathering for entrepreneurship, and the numbers are speaking for themselves. In this 4th edition, we have 25,000 participants, 200 exhibitors, investors, and we have ministerial delegations coming from more than 35 countries. And so the numbers are speaking for themselves. We can see that. And it's not just an event, because the timing could not be more important. Africa is accelerating its work toward trading between each other, African countries. We want to remove financial dependencies, and we are accelerating regional integration. We have seen what Africa have been doing for the past couple of years. We're going to explore all of these transformations that have been going on with our panel of guests. Mr. Rani Khouli, President of the Canada-Algeria Development Council, and you are also a strategic advisor for Africa Startup Conference. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Merci, thank you very much. And Angélique, you're the Managing Director of BDO Corporate Advisory in Rwanda. You also are an economist for more than 27 years. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Tahir Mullins, you're an angel investor and ventures capitalist. Thank you for joining us from South Africa.
Lovely to be here, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen and Our Lady. So this year's theme is Raising African Champions. Raising African Champions. In one sentence, what gives you optimism about Africa? We start with you, Mr. Hani.
I think if we relate it to the diaspora, not only Algerian one, but mainly the African one, we have this double culture. We live in the West, kind of, or around the world at least, and I think we have also the continental or our local context. So bridging those two contexts, I think it's one of the powers or one of the assets we might have. However, I would emphasize on one absolutely strategic element according to me. If it's for copy-paste what the West is doing, I don't think that this is exactly what is expected from our diaspora. So my point of view, to start the conversation, I would be very happy to have my colleagues' point of view on that, is how to adapt what is working,
adapt what we need,
how to assume our own responsibility with our own context, and I will be even more ambitious, how could we reinvent the mindset and the way that the West is going to the wrong direction, and we as Africans could be show the right way. I just want to remind ourselves that this event is under the African Union institutions, and Africa has now Agenda 2063. So I wish all the diaspora to ask himself or herself, what kind of Africa do we expect by 2063?
2063. Angélique, in one sentence?
Oh, for me, it's very simple. We are this continent. When 2030, we're going to have half of the youth under 15. So we have the muscles and we have the brain to do things right, to do things the proper way. We are starting late, and this is giving us the opportunity to do it properly.
What about you, Tahir? What's your take on that?
So actually, I largely echo the sentiment that, we have started late, but with that becomes immense opportunity, right? So I see a lot of I've had the privilege of working with a lot of interesting founders along the way. I get into the room with a lot of corporates, and what I see is a very strong determination. I see a lot of people with bold ideas, fantastic imaginations and great capability. The technical talent we have in Africa rivals that which you find in some of our more developed countries in the world. And so I'm really excited to see the hustle and the grind and the growing of our local industries and what that means for us in the future. So that's what I'm really excited about Africa.
Back to you, Rani, to talk about a very important topic, which is the diaspora. So in simple terms, how do you define Africa's diaspora's real economic power today and the Maghreb's real power, diaspora real power today?
I think many millions Africans rooted are living elsewhere. And I think one of the powers we have is we are exactly, and maybe to echo what our friend is saying, maybe we are late in some cases, but you know the advantage of being late is to learn from others' mistakes. So I consider that, just to give an example from entrepreneurship ecosystem point of view, the West is celebrating financial-only success. Is it what we need here in Africa? I don't believe so. In Africa, we need community support, we need solidarity, we need to solve our real issues, water, sanitation. So I don't think that being late is an obstacle, but if we are smart enough and connected enough, I do believe that not only we would overcome this barrier, but more importantly, we could even showcase the best mixed, I would say mixed paradigm of economic growth, which I could name being not based on the GPD theory. I wish to recall that GPD as an indicator is invented by an economist in the middle of a war to guide the US president simply to have a sort of dashboard to navigate during this mess. Guess what? Decades after, we in the South, we are still monitoring our economies, to answer your question, by this GPD. Come on, how could fireflies how could, for example, what happened in the California? We had a lot of trouble in California a few years ago. Could you imagine this catastrophe increases GPD of US? Why? Because insurance company had money, reconstruction and rebuilding companies had money. Out of what? Out of catastrophe. So what we claim is to shift from financial indicators only to well-being. I do claim to have an economy based on life.
That is our
power. An economy based on environmental, an economy based on saving the planet, because we are rooted here in Africa more related to our nature than we really need to save it. Otherwise, we will do exactly the same mistakes as the West. So this is, for me, the most important power that we have as a diaspora.
Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about brain drain.
Yes.
There are a lot of PhD holders that studied here in the continent, in Algeria, elsewhere, and then they went to work abroad. Yeah. How do we reverse the brain drain and have this brain drain circulation?
I think a year ago in this same plateau, we had this kind of questions, and I do believe that the diaspora is not requested anymore to come back physically. This was a myth, and this was an utopia, I would say. We have families there, we have our communities, we build economic power, so we are not obliged to come back physically. However, how to stop this hemorrhage is to give our young populations aspirations, to give them the tools that we already have in the West in order to thrive. They don't want all to leave. They want to thrive. They want to build the economy locally.
So they can help even without moving backwards to their countries. Do you agree on that?
What's the question?
Do you agree on the point that they don't necessarily have to come back to their countries and they could just, provide share their expertise and provide help by being there?
No, I agree, because now with remote working, with technology, you can participate to an economy from a distance, you can exchange your idea, you can monitor progress, so you don't need to be here present, but it's important to come and to see on the ground what is happening, because our reality is completely different from whatever they see where they are. We are starting from scratch, as I said, So we have to build infrastructure. And I wanted to insist on that because what I do on a daily basis is a program called Manufacturing Africa. And I work in the manufacturing sector. And what I've seen is that it really creates employment and it skills people from farming job to industrial job. And through the value chain, it's really feeding a lot of people. So because we need to invest in infrastructure, becoming too sophisticated, I really believe this type of program is life-changing. I can give you a few figures. In Rwanda, we helped 36 companies, and then they've been able to raise $182 million. For a small country like Rwanda, it's extraordinary. So I really think it's transformative, and I wanted to insist on that. Thank you.
Tahir, do you have a take on that?
Yeah, so I've got an angel syndicate. You know, we Pan-African. We've got representation in South Africa, Zimbabwe, France, UAE, South Africa. And the question that we always ask ourselves, one of the few questions that we always ask ourselves when we do every deal is, what can we do
to keep them
for the potential portfolio company in the country that we are in right now, you know? And even though we have representation in all of those places, those angels didn't actually come from those places. They actually came from Africa. So the benefit that we have is that we now have companies that we can invest in Africa, but we also have networks that can enable them to expand, generate international sales in those new markets, and bring that value back to the continent. So, you know, do we need our angels, our diaspora to come back? Some of them would be nice, but not all of them, because we actually need a little bit of both, right? We need to have an anchor in those other markets so that we can share the value and deliver the value. And in some ways, we also do want to bring some of that expertise back on the ground sometimes. You know, there's a certain level of work that you can do remotely, but sometimes to have that real impact, you need to be on the ground as well. So it's a bit of both, but I definitely see a lot of value in having diaspora out there promoting the African agenda and enabling African business to compete globally.
Tahir, you're yourself an angel investor.
Yes.
What is actually stopping investors, not stopping them, what is the obstacle for investors to find the right things to invest in?
Are you talking about local investors or global investors?
We're talking about the diaspora.
The diaspora.
Still with the diaspora.
Yeah.
I mean, do they see it as an opportunity? Do they not see it yet as an opportunity?
So, one of the reasons that we formed the Angel Syndicate is because people are interested, but people also don't know, right? They know what's happening in terms of the economy, they understand the politics of the places that they come from, but they're not on the ground, as you said, to see those opportunities.
It's important to be here to know.
Right? Mm-hmm. So what's crucial is that you actually have a bridge that enables, that shares that knowledge, that allows people to then act on that knowledge. But then the other thing that I think the challenge is, what I just spoke about now is mobilizing capital. So that's been able to say, here's an opportunity, let's go into it. The other part of it is then structuring that capital to go into those opportunities, right? So a lot of people also don't have that technical ability, or they don't understand how the rules may have changed, or maybe that's a part of the sector that they just never had an interest in. So there's an enablement layer that we actually need to do. So we need to not just say, here are the opportunities, but we need to be able to say, this is how you can access the opportunities in a tax efficient and most sort of legal way possible, you know. So I think those are some of the challenges around why diaspora maybe aren't as active as they could be.
Mm-hmm. I hope they're going to discover what is the African Union already doing in terms of tax incentives and everything here at the African Startup Conference. Mr. Ghani, could you give us an example of a success story, one example that proves that exporting is possible with the right structure?
You mean exporting from Algeria or Africa to overseas?
Yes.
Okay. I will give you maybe a subject where this will be an opportunity for the future of Africa. Imagine creative industries. Imagine gaming. And we have a panel now happening for this field, so I can at least summarize our insight on that. $1.2 billion is consumed through gaming in Africa every year. And the growth rates of this industry is absolutely more than 20% year over year. When you think about the industry created here locally in Africa, it's nearly, I wouldn't say zero, but not far from zero. So here is the opportunity. In the other side, the West, like Silicon Valley or the major studios around the world, are absolutely done with their Western mindset, games, war, etc. And there is a gap in terms of cultural assets. Africa has cultural assets. So what we claim in the initiative called Numidia Valley, powered by CDCA, the Council for Development Canada Algeria, is the following. We want Nelson Mandela's story to be an escape game. We want Ali Lapointe and La Bataille d'Alger.
Is it done? Is it done already?
It's already done.
It's done.
It's discussing now in another plan. So since 1 year, we had major achievements in this build up of the ecosystem. It's very hard. It's very long shot. But just to give you an export perspective, can you imagine the billions of dollars that African countries, when they reconcile with their own culture, they tell their own stories by their own creatives, the export opportunity is absolutely amazing. So I'm not referring to food, I'm not referring to oil and gas, I'm also referring to emerging industries where we could recontrol our narrative and tell our stories by African for Africa.
Back to you, Angélique. Rwanda is the guest of honor for this 4th edition of Africa Startup Conference, and it's known for being very advanced in digital transformation. There had been a lot of work done in that aspect, so it's often pointed out as a transformation story, right? What concrete elements can other African countries follow to follow the Rwandan expertise in that area?
Thank you for the question. It's really, really interesting what you're saying. We are a startup country. We consider that we have started in '94 after genocide from really zero. That's why we're able to build the right way, exactly like the story of Africa. We are really trying, we are looking at model and trying to do better. 4G is all around the country. We have started 5G in the city of Kigali. We are digitalized. The government service is digital, it's online. You can register a company in 6 hours. In Rwanda, 6 hours.
In Rwanda. So you have a coverage of more than 90% for 5G or 4G?
4G is the entire country.
You're done with that?
And 5G is the city of Kigali. We're starting. So really, it's digital because the model is effective, it works. You know, we have Zipline, which is a continent, model, because we are the country of the 1,000 hills. If you stand by car, you are not going to come on time. Zipline has been able to deliver blood in 10 minutes and medicine. So we really know what you can do with digital. And that's what we want to share with the other part of the continent.
Are you doing anything at your level to share this expertise?
Oh yes, of course, definitely. First of all, in the groups that we are, as I said, Manufacturing Africa, we cover 6 countries in Africa, and Rwanda is one of the models. And we explain how we do it and how we achieve great success using digital, using the fact that the government want to be modern, have lower regulation, and be very efficient and effective. And it works.
You know that startups sometimes, when they try to scale up, they find some obstacles, some hurdles. So what challenges do they face when they try to scale across borders? Let's talk about the Rwandan model.
I think Tade is going to talk more about it, but we know the first thing is capital. Capital is not there. You know, you have 4 countries in Africa where you have the 80% of the money coming into the continent: Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. The rest is like secondary market. But what we need to do and learn is to tell our story and tell them that the risk, the way they see the risk, is not the real risk. It's still a very young continent, and that's where you can invest and take the challenge of changing things around. And as I say, Rwanda is a secondary market, but we get investment, and it works.
And so, what role do women and the youth play in Rwanda's economic story today?
The youth.
The youth and the women as well.
The youth and women. In Rwanda, you know that we have the biggest number of women in parliament in the world.
Yes.
We
This
have
is why I
also,
mentioned
we
the
have
role of
more
women.
than half of women which are ministers, CEO. The banking sector majority is headed by women. It's a part because of the story, but our government have understood that you cannot work with half of your population. You have to work with everybody, and women have a different way of approaching problems and solutions, and it works. So that is what is important to say. The youth are the big part of my client. My job is to make them investment ready. So I work with them, I build their business plan, their business model, the investment memorandum. I prepare them to pitch and present them to investor. So I have two types of youth. So first are the greenfield, one with new ideas, but also have the brownfield, the second generation of industrialists who want to modernize and work more around Africa than just limited to Rwanda. So youth are very important.
Very important. If Africa wants true African champions, you know that the theme this year is to raise African champions. So what is the one thing we must do as Africans together to raise those African champions?
Well, first of all, we need to support them. That is very important. We need really to be supportive, to be able to explain. I was talking about with Tadeusz about, we know what went wrong, and we need to explain to them, don't copy the model of the West. This is not what we need. We don't need a pure fintech model. We need to really build our infrastructure, do what is pertinent for Africa, and respond to problems of Africa. That is really our duty, and we have to repeat it and to really send the model out, the information out.
So Rwanda again positions itself as a hub for a trade hub, logistics hub as well. What is the biggest or the bigger vision behind that, all of that, within the AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Rwanda is a small country, but we don't call it landlocked. We call it land-linked. That means in 3 hours you can be on any of the borders with very good roads, very good infrastructure. So it's really helpful to work in a country which is stable, organized, with clear regulation, and with a lot of security. So that's why we say we are one of the examples of how Africa can work.
Kigali is becoming a tech and creative hub. We've talked about how digital transformation has been going on in Rwanda. So for African youth watching us right now, what new sectors should they keep an eye on in Rwanda? And not just in Rwanda, across the continent.
When we talk about fintech, there's so many other techs. You have health techs, you have climate techs, you have insurance techs. They really need to look at the big picture. And as I said, be pertinent to the environment. They need to respond to problems, which is really actually existing in front of them, not copy and paste what has been done elsewhere.
I guess our two other guests agree on the fact that we should not copy and paste the Western models. Of course, we need solutions for our own problems because each one have their own problems. Tahir, what makes African startups more appealing to investors? You're an investor yourself again, compared to 5 years ago.
One of the things that's been very interesting is that 5 years ago we didn't have as much of a history. So, the venture private market investing ecosystem is still quite young compared to the rest of the world. So what we're actually starting to see now, 5 years later, is what it's like to have, multiple unicorns, what it's like to have multiple African startups actually list, not just abroad, but on local exchanges at significant valuations. We've had 2 in the last month. We've had a lot of failures, but those failures now are starting to bring opportunities because those are highly experienced founders. They know what went wrong the first time around. They're now coming into new opportunities with new teams and new solutions. There's a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? A bit more robust, a bit more resilient, because they've now learned what it is to have tight governance, because a lot of the founders that we see, the businesses don't fail because they have bad solutions. They're technically sound, they're amazing, they actually have customers, but they've made bad decisions along the way. So 5 years ago, we didn't have this wealth of experience that we have now. 5 years ago, we had some of the biggest injections going into our venture capital ecosystem than we've had, and that allowed a lot of new fund managers to make a lot of decisions, and a lot of those decisions were not good and a lot of those were good. But all of those have been immense learnings that we now have within our ecosystem, and the fund managers from 5 years ago are, they spun out and created more fund managers, So in the same way that the entrepreneurs now have this pool of experience, the fund managers have this pool of experience. So being in this venture space now at this time is a little bit more exciting because of that.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wouldn't like to seem like disagreeing, but maybe giving the chance to my friend to nuance something. I'm really concerned about the valuation.
Oh yeah.
And I'm really concerned about, exactly like I said a few minutes ago, about this mindset of performance, productivity. And I wish I could hear you maybe adding on that from your perspective. And I don't want to do the job of Miriam, who do it very well. But if, for example, for agri-tech, if we are applying exactly copy-pasting what the West is claiming, overconsumption, over-extraction would be the future. So I'm really concerned about that, and I wish I could understand how investors from diaspora or related to Africa could balance between attracting investment, exactly like you said, but by keeping our values, by keeping our solidarity, by keeping our KPIs out of this financial-driven mindset only.
So if I can respond to that.
Of course. I'm sorry, Miriam.
So I would say that right now there are very few fund managers, especially the ones that are raising funds now, that do not have an impact lens.
Oh,
right?
That's interesting.
So that is very different. Even our angel syndicate as an example, right? We look at it and we're like, okay, are you a first-time founder, second time? Do you have the technical and commercial expertise? We ask all of those questions.
Of course.
One of the other things that we look for is, and we don't measure it because we're not a large fund manager, but when we look at your business, we ask the question, what social or environmental value are you actually bringing? At face value, if I look at your business, am I investing in something that has a net positive impact? That's literally one of our criteria, and that's just us as an independent angel syndicate, and you're starting to see more and more investors. So, today I met an investor from Egypt, circular economy. They've done really well as a family business over the years, and they've been involved in venture capital before. And his thesis now is literally he wants to leave a lasting impact, and he wants to be able to do that across the continent, starting in Egypt. There are a lot of people right now in the industry pushing a little bit more than that. Our challenge, though, is we might communicate that amongst ourselves, but when we go out into the broader global ecosystem to try and raise capital, we've got to talk about the financial metrics. And so we do a lot of education about why what we're doing is a bit more important than just the finances. But that does slow sort of the momentum and the fundraising a little bit. And so that's why a lot of the marketing messaging that you're seeing is around the financial return. But I can guarantee you, Africa is pretty much focused now on the green economy, impact investment, healthcare, making healthcare a bit more accessible, a bit more affordable as well. So a lot of the funds that are successfully raising now as well, they're looking to bridge the infrastructure deficits that we have, right? And that is again in healthcare, and that is again in logistics, which now has an EV, an electric vehicle sort of angle to it, which then again has the impact of being environmentally friendly. So there's a lot of stuff that we are doing now. It's maybe not coming out the way it should in terms of what you're talking about, but Africa is on its way there. It's still early, but we'll start to see those measurable results alongside the financial results in due course.
So this is a real example of what diaspora bring to the continent.
To the
Having
continent?
this mixed, yes for finance, yes for bring money, but the way we use money, the use of funds, the way we measure success, and by the way we could discuss about measuring impact, this is the point that I wanted to highlight in this panel.
This panel. Tahir, since we're talking about investments, how do you evaluate, this is the second day of the African Startup Conference, how do you evaluate everything that's going on? Have you been meeting people? How do you see things?
The really interesting part about this has been the convening of like the African mind, but then also not just the African mind in Africa. We've actually got people who are from Africa who've now got the level of expertise and that sort of thing, and all of that has come home again, you know, and that's probably the most exciting part of what I've seen here. The other part is, you know, there are actually very interesting science and engineering innovations coming from Africa that are on display over here. And we've actually got investors. We're legitimately looking at these opportunities and saying, how can I scale this into my territory on the continent? You
so
know?
There is a bigger interest in deep tech?
Definitely. You know, we had this discussion a few days ago around deep tech. You know, it's increasingly we're seeing less and less people very exclusively focused on just fintech or e-commerce. More and more we're starting to see the absorption of deep tech into fund manager portfolios. Angel investors are also getting into deep tech. At some point we're going to have to say, well, what is this deep tech thing if everybody's doing it? And it's becoming so much easier to get to a point of, you know, saying this is deep tech. So at some point, you know, it's just going to be tech.
So more interest in deep tech. And what are the biggest barriers? I think you spoke about the biggest barriers preventing investors from betting big on Africa, in short.
It's some of the stuff that we're addressing now, you know. So the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, as an example, you know, it's an idea of how we can all work together, right? But it also is a signal of confidence to outside investors that there actually is a more cohesive and coherent way to do business on the continent that's coming, you know. There is still a lack of knowledge of what it's like to do business on the continent. I think we need to enable people to do more business here, because if we do more business here, people will be more comfortable investing because they would have experienced that operating environment. There's a couple of conferences that I go to every year, and it's almost exclusively overseas family offices that attend. And if you speak to every single one of them, they'll tell you that they're doing business on the continent, and they were doing business on the continent before they started investing. So stuff like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is instrumentally important to sending out a marketing message at the very least that Africa is a unified trading bloc, that, you know, it is easy to do business. And then once people actually start doing business, they'll actually be more comfortable investing.
There is a new Pan-African payment system. It has been launched just a couple of months ago. It's called the PAPSS, and it allows African countries to trade with each other in local currencies. What do you think about this?
That's fantastic. You know, once we can start trading in local currency, the game changes completely. You know, even if you just take that a step further and you go into, obviously I'm wearing my fund management hat all the time, but even if I take it into that environment, right, if I want to invest in a fund in Kigali, you know, I can then invest in rands. You know, I don't have to convert into dollars, pay a fee, convert back into local currency, you know, and for me that's a fantastic opportunity. You know, if we can settle with each other, you know, in terms of trade as well, I mean, that enables us to not allow leakage to be facilitated offshore, you know, by bankers that are based offshore that, you know, have zero real interest in the continent, you know, and that's purely extractive. The other part of it is, you know, if we no longer need to trade in, you know, the greenback, the relative positioning of our currencies to the greenback becomes less important, right? And so we start valuing our companies and we start valuing our trade and our relationships very differently. And that's what I'm really excited about what you've just mentioned, you know. If we can settle immediately in kwacha, rand, dinars, you know, then we're in a really, really, really good position.
So since we only have a couple of minutes to wrap up, if each one of you could speak directly to young Africans and to young African startups watching us today, what is one message that you want them to remember? We'll start with you, Rani.
So the question is about the youth specifically? Or?
It's about the our young population. It's also about the new startups.
Okay. So for me, the message is I've been entrepreneur here in Algeria 15 years ago, and I saw the advancement that we had, exactly like my colleagues are saying. So we have a chance to have problems. We have a chance to have problems to solve because it creates startups opportunities, and we have a chance to have problems because it educates our young population to be agile, to think differently, and to think outside of the box. So if I can summarize at least for those 2 points, please consider them as an advantage instead of blaming the ecosystem, instead of blaming the reality. In the West, everything is so smooth and easy that they are exactly doing the same thing over and over. So take this chance and size it to think differently. We will not only solve our real issues, our real problem, but we will be also exporting them around the world, hopefully.
Maybe quickly, before we wrap up, one message.
No, very important. You know, youth, young people, you are going to evaluate in an environment which is completely different than ours. You're going to have Africa, which is 54 countries, but under one FCFT, under one way of sending money. Is going to be much easier for you. But users to really know what to do, how to do it, and do it better than what we have been able to do.
Tahir, one sentence to wrap up.
Very briefly, it's okay to fail, right? Go ahead, you might be a first generation, second generation entrepreneur. Just go ahead and do what you need to do. You don't always have to fail. Find yourself a mentor. Mentors are really important. They can be in the industry that you're from, they can be from your country, they can be global, but just find yourself a mentor to help guide you through this journey. It's very interesting, very exciting, but just go for it and try and get the right guidance.
Thank you very much to our panel of guests. We have to wrap up. I'm told we have run out of time. So raising African champions is not a dream. It's underway and it's happening here in the African Startup Conference. Thank you everyone for watching. You've been following us from Algiers. I'm Miriam Zian and see you in the next time.